The galactic chamber loomed vast, its obsidian walls reflecting the glow of alien constellations. Fleets hovered in orbit, silent weapons pointed toward Earth, billions of eyes watching the judgment unfold. Shackled in chains that bit into bruised wrists, Daniel said, so this is how humanity ends, with silence before cold voices. Judge Silent said, obedience is survival, and your kind failed. The weight of the verdict pressed heavier than gravity itself, each syllable erasing futures. Daniel's chest tightened, every heartbeat echoing with billions of unspoken screams. As the silence stretched, an unseen whisper slithered through shadows, hissing into Daniel's ears. They are not just judging you, they are judging us all. The silence stretched like a blade across Daniel's neck, the court holding its breath as though the galaxy itself waited for his collapse. Judge Exilin said, your crimes are carved across the stars. Humanity is reckless, violent, unworthy of survival. Daniel whispered, obedience is not survival, it is the death of dignity. Gasps rippled through the crowd as alien eyes narrowed. In the shadows, the whisper repeated like an echo, reminding Daniel that this moment was larger than him. The tribunal chamber vibrated with low murmurs, the sound like grinding stone. Daniel's chains clattered as he raised his head higher. Judge Ellen said, you speak of dignity as though it has weight, but it cannot shield you from extinction. Daniel steadied his breathing and said, then let extinction come with truth. The whisper in the shadows hissed again, endure, for they seek not justice but fear. The court stirred uneasily, their unity fracturing in silence. A beam of alien light scanned across Daniel's body, displaying his trembling form for all to see. Judge Silent said, kneel in obedience, and perhaps a fragment of your kind will survive. Daniel said, to kneel is to surrender the last breath of humanity. The chamber fell into stunned silence, alien figures shifting in their seats as if unsettled. The unseen whisper murmured, they wanted submission, but you gave them defiance. Daniel's heart pounded with fear and fire intertwined. The court's silence cracked as alien voices murmured dissent, their unity shaken by Daniel's words. Judge Exilin struck his staff against obsidian, a sound that thundered like collapsing worlds. Judge Silent said, defiance will burn your species. Daniel, voice hoarse, said, then let us burn, for fire proves we lived. The whisper spoke softer, they wanted fear, you gave them warning. Billions of eyes across the galaxy watched, and for the first time doubt flickered within them. The chamber darkened as silence wrapped around Daniel's trembling form, yet memories flooded stronger than the judgment looming above. Images of a burning village surfaced, children screaming while fire devoured all. Daniel clenched his fists as the chains rattled, remembering his brother Michael whispering, stand tall even when broken. Judge Eileen said, your past defines the chaos of your species. Daniel lowered his gaze, whispering, pain does not erase dignity. The whisper in shadows murmured again, your scars are not shame, they are testimony. His heart pulsed with grief and fury, scars etched as reminders of humanity's cost. Daniel's chest heaved as his mind dragged him into another memory, the betrayal of comrades. The courtroom melted away into the dark corridors of a collapsing bunker where soldiers once trusted abandoned him to die. Daniel whispered, even when betrayed, one does not kneel. Judge Silent said, your kind devours itself before enemies strike. The echoing whispers slithered, they fear the endurance carved from your betrayals. The alien court shifted uneasily, their eyes narrowing as though sensing truths too raw to ignore. The tribunal's silence echoed louder than their words as Daniel's breath steadied, recalling the night his home was lost. Flames engulfed walls, the cries of his mother, Lyra ringing sharp before silence claimed her. Daniel said, I carry ghosts, but they are not chains. They are fire that keeps me standing. Judge Silent said, your weakness lies in sentiment. The whisper from the shadows answered, your sentiment is their terror. Alien eyes flickered uneasily, their stillness breaking under the weight of his confession. The memories pierced Daniel, but instead of breaking, they anchored him. He whispered, "Humanity was not chosen for its strength but for its survival." Judge Silent tilted his head and said, "Survival without obedience is folly." Daniel's voice cracked yet carried weight. "Survival without dignity is death." The shadowed whisper echoed, "Your refusal is the line they fear." The chamber's stillness twisted as alien murmurs rose, disbelief clashing with the calm defiance radiating from his words. The air thickened with unease, as though even the walls listened. Daniel steadied himself, sweat dripping across his bruised cheek, and said, "They can strip flesh, burn worlds, erase names, but they cannot erase the will to stand unbroken." Judge Silent slammed his clawed hand into the armrest, growling, "You mistake defiance for worth." The whisper lingered, "You remind them that obedience is the death of dignity." Around the chamber, billions watching felt the crack in certainty, a spark too small to control yet too sharp to silence. The chamber flickered with shifting holograms, each image a brutal reminder of humanity's blood-stained history. Endless wars played across the air, cities burning, soldiers falling, screams frozen in alien light. Judge Silent said, "This is your legacy, violence without end." Daniel's jaw tightened as the weight of false evidence pressed against him. He whispered, "You twist truth into shackles." The whisper lingered close. "Not all of what they show is real." Alien spectators murmured, their voices echoing like cold water through stone. The trial was no longer about truth, but the manipulation of memory. The holograms shifted again, displaying scenes of cruelty. But Daniel's eyes sharpened. He recognized distortions, images of massacres twisted with altered faces, events spliced into lies. Daniel said, "This is not judgment, this is fabrication." Judge Silent said, "Your denial is proof of guilt." The whisper crept, "They fear the truth hidden beneath their theater." The crowd shifted restlessly, alien figures whispering to each other, uncertainty cracking the veneer of perfect control. Daniel's heartbeat thundered like war drums, but defiance burned steadier than fear. The gallery erupted with a sudden voice as Marcus, the collaborator, stepped forward from the shadows. Marcus said, "The evidence is undeniable, Daniel. Humanity is guilty, and submission is survival." Daniel's eyes widened as betrayal cut sharper than any chain. Daniel said, "You would kneel to erase our name, but obedience is the death of dignity." Judge Silent's gaze darkened, pleased at the human's betrayal. The whisper hissed faintly, "Not all who stand beside you are allies." The chamber vibrated with tension, as truth fractured further under lies. The tribunal displayed more scenes of cruelty, but Daniel's focus cut through them. He saw timelines warped, evidence stitched from fragments. Daniel shouted, "These are lies built from shadows." Judge Silent said, "Silence. Every word you speak deepens your condemnation." Marcus smiled faintly, his betrayal plain, while alien spectators leaned forward hungry for blood. Yet amidst them, one figure remained still, Ra, the silent ally. Her gaze softened for an instant, sympathy hidden behind sorrow. "And," the whisper lingered again, "one voice here does not wish your end." The tribunal's illusions darkened into final judgment, displaying earth consumed by fire, oceans boiling, skies black. Daniel's throat tightened, but his voice steadied. He said, "You fear not our crimes but our endurance. Even if you burn us, we rise." Judge Silent slammed his crystalline staff, declaring, "Your words cannot undo history." Marcus said, "Your dignity will end with your ashes." The whisper's tone sharpened, "They set the stage for your death, yet the truth leaks through." The audience murmured louder, cracks spreading in their certainty. The court transformed, its walls shifting into jagged arenas of black stone as the ordeal was declared. Judge Silent said, "Endure and prove the worth you claim." Daniel's chains were unlocked only to be replaced with heavier iron weights, dragging across his arms. Marcus smirked and said, "Let them see you crawl." Alien eyes glowed with anticipation. The silent ally, Lyra, lowering her gaze in quiet sorrow. The whisper came like a blade of resolve. "They will break body before spirit. You must not surrender." Daniel steadied himself, prepared for torment beyond words. The ordeal began with a platform rising from the floor, spiked and burning with alien fire. Daniel was forced upon it, heat searing through his skin while alien voices roared approval. Judge Exilin said, "Suffering will reveal truth." Daniel clenched his teeth and whispered, "Pain is not surrender." Marcus laughed softly, his polished boots glinting in the firelight. Lyra turned her face away, sorrow etched deeper. The whisper lingered. "Every wound is proof they fear your endurance." The chamber thickened with smoke and judgment. Daniel's legs buckled as the spikes tore into him, but he refused to fall. Judge Exilin said, "Weakness defines your kind." Daniel lifted his head, voice hoarse. "Weakness is not falling, but giving up. Humanity does not give up." Marcus scoffed, "Your words will not stop the fire." Lyra's sorrowful eyes flickered with the faintest light of respect. The whisper came steady, "They cannot measure strength. They do not understand." The alien spectators murmured, some uncertain, others craving Daniel's collapse. The ordeal shifted as massive stone wheels chained to Daniel's arms began to spin, dragging him across jagged ground. The crowd cheered as his skin tore against the stone. Judge Silin declared, "This is your trial by truth." Daniel gasped through the pain. "Truth is that fire cannot erase dignity." Marcus laughed louder, pointing toward him, as if to mock his endurance. Lyra's lips parted slightly, though no words left. The whisper echoed, "Every breath you take is defiance." The chamber's cruelty became theater, but the theater revealed their fear. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, body torn and bruised, but his eyes burned with defiance. Judge Eileen said, "Your body breaks, your spirit follows." Daniel forced himself to rise on trembling arms and said, "Dignity is not broken by chains or fire." Marcus's smirk faltered, unease flashing across his polished face. Lyra's gaze softened, sorrow shifting into silent strength. The whisper struck firm. "They sought proof of weakness, but what they see is resilience." The chamber stirred with doubt, as Daniel bled but refused to kneel. Daniel rose from the blood-stained floor, his chains rattling as silence cut through the jeering crowd. Judge Silin said, "You endure only to delay the inevitable." Daniel's voice trembled but sharpened. "You mistake silence for defeat. Humanity has always spoken through sacrifice." Marcus sneered, "Your words are empty." The chamber flickered with unrest as alien murmurs grew louder. Lyra's sorrowful eyes glistened with quiet recognition. The whisper surged within shadows, "Now is the moment to speak, not for yourself but for all." Daniel steadied, ready to turn pain into defiance. Daniel's voice grew steadier, carrying across the hall. He said, "Humanity's history is written in graves, yet from every grave we rise. We bury sons, shield daughters, and still we endure." Judge Silin leaned forward, crystalline features glowing sharply as he said, "Endurance cannot erase crimes." Marcus scoffed, "They call ashes victory." Lyra's lips parted slightly, but her words remained unspoken. The whisper pressed urgently, "Tell them what they fear most, the fire that cannot be extinguished." Alien murmurs surged, doubt rippling across the chamber. Holograms above the chamber shifted, revealing moments of human resilience, families surviving famine, explorers venturing into void, lovers holding hands at the edge of war. Daniel said, "We are not asking for mercy, we are demanding recognition." Judge Silin's crystalline eyes narrowed, reflecting unease. Marcus snapped, "Recognition belongs to the obedient." Lyra's gaze lingered on Daniel with quiet strength. The whisper struck like thunder. "They feared this moment when your voice becomes a flame." The chamber's silence now trembled with tension that no verdict could contain. Suddenly, the betrayal sharpened into cruelty as Marcus moved closer, smirk curling. Marcus said, "This is no trial, Daniel. This was always fear disguised as justice. Daniel's chest burned as realization struck, betrayal no longer hidden. Judge Xylan said nothing, his silence colder than denial. Lyra's eyes shimmered, torn between duty and sympathy. The whisper hissed, "The truth is revealed, yet your strength must answer louder than lies." Daniel steadied himself, voice low but firm. "Then let fear be their judgment, not ours." The chamber rattled with unease. The chamber roared with conflict, voices rising like storm winds. Daniel lifted his head high, chains dragging but spirit unbroken. He said, "You may bind me, bleed me, break me, but you cannot erase the fire of humanity. That fire lives in every sacrifice, every rise from ruin." Judge Xylan's staff struck the ground, sparks scattering as silence fell again. Marcus's smugness faltered, unease creeping into his eyes. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, as if in prayer. The whisper thundered, "The galaxy has heard. The fire cannot be silenced." The tribunal chamber trembled as Judge Xylan raised his crystalline staff. Judge Xylan said, "The verdict is final. Humanity is sentenced to extermination." Daniel's chest ached, but his eyes burned brighter, whispering, "Then let us burn standing." Marcus smirked, pleased, yet unease flickered at the edges of his smile. Lyra's hands trembled as her sorrow deepened, her silence heavier than words. Alien spectators erupted in divided shouts, some demanding death, others murmuring doubt. The whisper thundered, their unity fractures before their own decree. The chamber's order dissolved into chaos. The chamber descended into chaos, voices colliding like storms. Judge Xylan slammed his staff, the sound cracking through stone. Judge Xylan shouted, "Silence! Order will be restored." Daniel forced himself upright, his chains clattering like broken thunder. Daniel said, "Your judgment proves not justice but fear." Marcus hissed, "Fear is survival." Lyra's sorrow shifted into restrained strength as her gaze hardened. Alien factions shouted at each other, their glowing eyes no longer united. The whisper said, "The truth has been spoken aloud, and it cannot be silenced." Suddenly, holograms burst overhead, unraveling hidden transmissions. Alien voices revealed conspiracies stitched by unseen architects, lies planted to paint humanity as monsters. Daniel gasped but steadied, whispering, "So truth leaks even from shadows." Judge Xylan's crystalline features stiffened, no denial leaving his lips. Marcus's face paled, his composure cracking. Lyra whispered faintly, "It was never justice, it was fear." Alien spectators erupted louder, half demanding execution, half demanding truth. The whisper pressed fiercely. Now, the galaxy sees what they never wanted revealed. Alien factions clashed, their voices clanging like steel against stone. Judge Xylan said, "The verdict remains, extermination will proceed." Daniel forced himself forward, voice carrying above the chaos, "You cannot erase us. You cannot bury us. We live in the fear you breathe." Marcus shouted, "Your words are poison." Lyra rose slowly, her sorrow giving way to quiet defiance as her voice carried, "Perhaps his words are truth." The whisper surged, "Even among them your fire spreads." The chamber spiraled into riot. The chamber burned with chaos, alien guards unable to restrain the warring factions. Judge Xylan's booming voice was drowned by thousands of clashing cries. Daniel stood battered yet unbroken, whispering, "We are already inside you, in memory and in fear." Marcus backed away, unease heavy in his eyes as his authority cracked. Lyra's gaze stayed on Daniel, her sorrow now transformed into silent strength. The whisper roared, "The trial is no longer theirs, it is yours." Billions watching across the galaxy saw not judgment but a warning. The chamber quaked as voices roared like storms, alien factions striking against one another. Daniel stood tall despite torn chains, his blood painting the obsidian floor. Judge Xylan raised his crystalline staff, but doubt fractured his once absolute voice. Marcus hissed venom, declaring survival through obedience, yet his trembling eyes betrayed fear. Lyra rose among the chaos, her voice soft but unyielding, speaking of dignity beyond fear. The whisper thundered through shadows, echoing across walls, declaring that the fire of truth had already spread. The galaxy trembled as judgment shifted from decree to defiance. Daniel's voice rang through the chaos, declaring that humanity's spirit endured in fire, loss, and sacrifice. Judge Excilen's crystalline gaze faltered, the certainty of his decree shaken. Marcus shouted that fire meant nothing when ashes were all that remained. Lyra stepped forward, her sorrow now a shield of strength, whispering that dignity outlives fear. The whisper slithered close, reminding Daniel that his words now carried the weight of billions across the stars. The court, once united in judgment, dissolved into doubt and unrest. Holograms ignited above, showing images of graves where families rose again, explorers reaching voids, and lovers holding each other at war's edge. Daniel declared humanity demanded recognition, not mercy. Judge Excilen leaned forward, crystalline skin refracting sharp light, voice cold but strained. Marcus barked that only obedience earned recognition, his voice cracking beneath the echo of unrest. Lyra's eyes burned with silent support, her quiet defiance shining brighter than sorrow. The whisper roared, warning that fear was no longer their weapon, but humanity's mirror. The chamber rattled as Marcus stepped forward, smirk twisted with cruelty, declaring the trial a theater of fear. Daniel steadied, voice low but firm, proclaiming that fear itself had become their judgment. Judge, silence. Silence struck colder than words, his gaze unreadable. Lyra's voice trembled but carried, questioning whether dignity was truly weakness. The whisper surged like thunder, reminding Daniel that truth revealed through pain becomes flame. Around them, alien voices fractured further, fury clashing with doubt, their unity shattered by defiance. The chamber stormed with clashing voices, guards failing to restore order. Daniel raised his head high, chains rattling like thunder, declaring humanity could not be erased, for its fire lived in sacrifice and defiance. Judge Excilen struck his crystalline staff, sparks scattering as silence fell momentarily. Marcus's arrogance cracked, unease clouding his eyes. Lyra closed her eyes in silent prayer, her strength bound to Daniel's defiance. The whisper roared through every corner, proclaiming that the galaxy had heard, and the fire could never be silenced.